Well, hello there, gunfighters. Welcome to this episode of Gunfighter Life. I put out a post on Patreon today, but open to anybody that went there. You didn't have to be a paying member, asking for questions on the shotgun. And you guys delivered. I got a bunch of really good questions. Gauges, chokes, patterns, shot types. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Random questions from the audience on shotguns. If that interests you, stay tuned to this episode of Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center. Biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm blessed to serve you as host. First and foremost, a Christian. Been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, and lifelong hunter. And a bunch of other stuff that'll be in the show notes. But that stuff's kind of germane to today's topic. The shotgun. I'm a big proponent of the shotgun. I talk a lot about it, mostly because nobody else does. They're trying to push you on a bunch of less practical stuff that costs a lot more money, like $1,200 on a suppressor to make something that's really loud, a little bit less loud, but still too loud. So you still got to wear hearing protection. But don't worry, you spent $1,200 so you look cool on Instagram. But the shotgun is one of the most practical, versatile firearms out there, and there's a lot not being covered by the gun tube glitterati, by a bunch of the industry, because they're so simple and so effective and so affordable. I think we get a couple of new rifle cartridges every year. It's 100 feet per second faster than something that's been around 120 years. Ooh, gotta have it. All right, but when's the last time we had a new shotgun gauge? Anyway, that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about your guys' questions. We got a lot of really good ones. So, with that being said, let's look at it. Roscoe. More 410 content. Now, I recently did a whole episode on the 410, but he says, on the 410, the shells look anemic. Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Yeah, compared to a 12 gauge, a 410 shell does look anemic. If you compare it to a 9mm, it looks like a beast. And I'm a big fan of the 9mm. It's a great balance for a handgun between shootability and controllability of recoil and effectiveness. It's a good balance. There's a reason it's the standard. But it's a handgun round. You look at the effectiveness of that and something like a pretty standard old school 410 buckshot load, which is, I believe, 5 pellets of triple-aught buck, which is roughly the same caliber, but you get 5 pellets of it. Generally, they're faster than a 9mm is going to be. And suddenly, it doesn't look so anemic. So, yeah, what are you comparing it to? If you're comparing it to a 12 gauge, yeah, it's a lot smaller. If you're comparing it to a handgun round, it's a lot more powerful. It's a lot more effective inside what most people can effectively get hits on with a handgun. A lot of people, even law enforcement officers, struggle getting hits on target at 25 meters. Average 12-year-old girl with a good 410 shotgun can get good hits, especially on a stationary target at 25 meters. So if you look at it in that light, it's not so anemic. The 410 is great. The big problem with it is it's expensive, and I like to shoot a lot. So, yeah, you get a lot less recoil. It's still plenty effective enough for self-defense. But it costs a lot more money to shoot. The other thing with the 410 is that it's plenty powerful enough for defense. It's plenty powerful enough for medium, small game, even deer if you use the right ammo, like a good Brenneke slug. It's plenty enough for deer at reasonable ranges. You give up a lot, though, if you're shooting animals off the wing, right? If you're going pheasant hunting, you can certainly do it with a 410, but you're doing it because you want the challenge. It's a lot harder than it is with a 12 or a 20 gauge, right? There's a reason why when you shoot those different sporting events, there's different classes for different gauges, because it's harder. You get a lot less pellets, and if you're trying to shoot something out of the air, yeah, that's an issue. Do you want 200 pellets or do you want 600 pellets when you're trying to shoot something that's flying 60 miles an hour through the air? So that's where you give up a lot. If you're shooting, a squirrel on the ground, it's plenty. That's, you're going to wait for it to stop hopping. There are different loads, but in general, right, a number 6 pellet out of a 410 is going to be just as lethal as a number 6 pellet out of a 12 gauge. You're going the same velocity. And you only need a few of those on target to kill a squirrel or a rabbit. So you're really not giving up a lot there. You're giving up a lot because it costs more for a smaller amount, a smaller shell. And if you're trying to shoot stuff out of the air, it absolutely is harder with a 410. But it is a very good question. Let's keep going here. Thoughts on different shot metal types, bismuth, etc. What are they good for? They're good for when the government tells you lead is bad. Bad lead. Oh, a duck might eat it. Oh, a condor might eat it. It's so bad. No lead for you, normie. That's really it. And because steel sucks so bad, it's really horrible. You'd think if they cared about animals, they'd want you to cripple a lot less animals, but they don't really. It's just trying to ban stuff, I think. Anyway, that's just my thoughts there. I love the environment. I love nature. I love animals. They're delicious. But honestly, I think it's probably worse for the animals. The reason you have all those other shots is because you can't have lead and steel sucks. So you have a bunch of other stuff to work around it. And that's really it. Stuff like bismuth. There is stuff that's heavier than lead. So that stuff is very good. It's also very, very expensive, like several dollars per round. But that's really why it exists, right? Nobody was talking about bismuth when it was legal to hunt mallards with lead shot. I went to steel shot and was like, wow, this stuff's horrible. Can you kill a duck with it? Yeah, if you move up several pellet sizes, like several sizes in shot, like going from a 6 to a 4 or a 3 or a 2, it's fairly comparable. But you get a lot, going back to that pellet count, you get a lot less pellets. So that's really why they exist. Some shot is softer, so you can shoot it through old shotguns where you can't use lead shot anymore. Some of the shot type is very hard, like tungsten, so you don't want to shoot that. You do your own research on what kind of shotgun you have and what kind of choke you have. That would be a really long nerdy episode. But there's different types, different hardnesses. Some you can shoot through old shotguns with old fixed chokes, and some you can't. But really, that's what it's all about. And some is actually heavier than lead, although those elements that are heavier are quite expensive. And they're really a specialty, like if you don't mind spending several dollars per a shot because you want the best pattern for turkey. And realize that's kind of a government thing too, right? Because you could just go out and shoot turkey with a 223 or a 22 Magnum at much greater ranges and be very effective. But they say, no, you got to use a shotgun. It's become this whole industry thing. Forgetting that we nearly hunted the turkey to extinction with old lead number 6 shot. And largely black powder shells, right? You don't need those specialty shells to hunt turkey, but it's become this own thing like, how far away can I shoot a turkey in the face with a shotgun? But anyway, yeah, that's the kind of the deal there. Places where you want something heavier than lead because it's really trendy to see how far you can shoot a turkey in the face, or where the government has said you shall not use lead shot. Lead shot is bad and steel is horrible compared to lead, so you try to find something else. That's really why those exist. And let's move on there. Okay, the next one. Types of shot for different species. I think I've done a whole episode on this, but man, that's a hard question. Generally, I'm going to give you a real quick, brief overview. Roughly, right? So, of course, it depends on your choke and your gauge and all this stuff, but, let's say in general, small birds, number 8s and number 7s. And all this is, I'm talking about real ammunition, like lead shot, not some of that other garbage we talked about, but lead shot. Small birds, quail, dove, number 8s, even maybe number 9s, number 8s, maybe 7.5, just because it's cheaper, not because it's better. And then when you get into larger birds, pheasant, things like that, you're talking number 6s. And if you're talking small game, number 6 is also, you're talking about rabbit, squirrel. Generally, number 6 is pretty good for that, like a high velocity number 6. If you're talking waterfowl, again, you get into the federal government because waterfowl is federal. You not only have to buy a state hunting license, you have to buy a federal hunting license, a stamp, to be able to hunt, the government's waterfowl, because it flies from state to state, and that requires use of steel shot. So that's its own thing. And then obviously when you move up into larger things like deer, buckshot is called buckshot for a reason. You got to pattern it through your gun and make sure you know the distance that it's ethical. And then obviously slugs. That's a brief oversimplification. What choke should I use for small game, medium game birds, and anti-personnel? Man, that really depends. That's like asking, no offense, because I know you're trying to learn, and it's a great question, but it's really complex. That's like you getting a 308. You're like, I have a 308. I don't know anything else. You're like, I have a 308. What ammo should I get? Man, that really depends on your 308 and what it likes. We could even have the same model gun, and it could like completely different ammo. Mine could like Federal High Shock, and yours could like Winchester White Box. Winchester, Winchester Super X. That's like the old classic one, right? We could both have Remington 700s. Mine could like Remington Corlocks, and yours could like Winchester X Point, right? And even if it's the same model, even if it came off the assembly line one after another, it could like completely different ammo. And that's just 308, right? Shotguns with different chokes and different things are exponentially more complicated. You need to get out and pattern your gun for you, even with the same species. Like, we're both hunting quail. Well, are you hunting quail over dogs? Because a lot of those shots are going to be really close. You probably want a far different choke than if you were trying to hunt them another way, or hunt doves where maybe you're hiding and they're flying in. Maybe the shots are longer, right? So it really isn't even more complicated than just a species. And what kind of shooter are you? You got to get out and practice and train. Are you the kind of shooter that as soon as you see a bird, bam, you pull the trigger? Are you the kind of shooter that takes a little bit longer, lets the bird get out farther, make sure your lead's all calculated correctly, and then pulls the trigger? Even hunting over the same dog, two shooters might prefer two completely different chokes, or completely different. If we go back to that same scenario, we're hunting bobwhite quail over dog, right? And one shooter may really prefer number 9 shot because he shoots him up close, and he might prefer a skeet choke. And another shooter over the same dog may let the birds get out a little bit farther, pick one, calculate his lead, and he might like 7.5 shot and a light modified. So again, even in the same situation, same dog, same birds, completely different answer. So it really depends on you. You need to get out there and hunt. So that's like asking, what should I hunt deer with? I don't know. Do you live in the UP of Minnesota, or the UP of Michigan rather, or do you live in, the swamps of Georgia? Or are you hunting the same species of white-tailed deer in the Missouri Breaks in Montana? It seems like a simple question, but when you dig into it, it's exponentially complicated. So it's an extremely difficult question. You got to pattern it, especially with you and your shotgun, right? Your shotgun with the same load could pattern better with a different choke than the same shotgun, same model, with the same or different load. So it really depends on you. The most versatile chokes, generally, I would say start with an improved cylinder. It's probably the best for an all-around choke. Why? Because you can shoot like a Foster slug through any choke, but in general, they recommend that you shoot them through a cylinder or an improved cylinder choke. And an improved cylinder gives you much better performance with most other shots. So in general, improved cylinder. But again, that's a vast generality. If you don't know any better, improved cylinders is a good thing to start from. I've done a whole episode on slugs, but he asks about different kinds of slugs. Why not always Foster? Why Brenneke not as popular? Why is Brenneke not as popular as a Foster slug? So a Foster slug is the standard here in America. And the Foster slug is absolutely, in a 12 gauge, more powerful than you need. Even a low recoil 12 gauge Foster, 1 ounce Foster slug. So a standard vanilla load, standard load, 12 gauge Foster slug, 1 ounce is 1,600 feet a second, which is, if you convert to grains, 437 grains, I think. I think there's a point something in there, but 437 grains at 1,600 feet a second. That's a pretty vanilla load. Like you go to Walmart and get a box of them, whatever brand, they're all around the same. Well, that's way more than you need for defense, for deer hunting at reasonable ranges. So even a low recoil is like a 1 ounce slug at 1,300 or 1,350 or 1,410. Still way more than you need. Still massive. So they're all more than you need. For deer hunting, for, defense against people inside shotgun ranges. The place that the Brenneke comes in, if you want really deep penetration, if you don't know the shapes and types of slugs, you should look up a Foster slug versus a Brenneke. If you want it for bear defense or hunting bear, or in the tactical scenario, if you want it for really deep penetration, like you're trying to stop a vehicle or you're trying to go through doors, things like that, the Brenneke slug has a lot of chops. So it's generally thought of as being a lot deeper penetrating. They can also be quite accurate. Both can, depending on your shotgun. Again, shotguns are pretty individual, and you should test your loads. But that's why Brenneke. It's a completely different design of slug. Why are they not more popular here? Because they're European. Our standard is a Foster slug. Their standard is a Brenneke slug, right? It's like asking, why is the 6.5 Creedmoor so popular here when the 6.5 F.55 Swede is well over 100 years old and basically has the same ballistics? Well, because one's European, and it just never caught on here. And that's really why they're not more popular here. And in general, for the things most people use slugs for, anti-personnel stuff or hunting deer, the Foster slug is way more than you need. So why spend the extra money and go trying to find some European ammo? And that's really it there. It's a good question. Tips on carrying shotgun ammo in the field and battlefield. Okay, here's my number one tip for carrying shotgun ammo on a battlefield. Shoot the first guy that's trying to kill you, take his battle rifle and his LBV, his load-bearing vest, and use it. I love the shotgun. Shotgun's fantastic. I think I've said many times, though, it's not the best for everything. It's not a battlefield weapon. Nobody is arming their mainline infantry to go out and, stop the Russians at the Fulda Gap, or probably more common in today's, because I think we have a lot in common with Russia now, trying to stop, the Chi-Com invasion. Nobody's going to arm their mainline infantry with shotguns. There's a reason for that. Shotguns are not for that. They're not a battlefield weapon. So if you find yourself on a battlefield with a shotgun, shoot the first guy that's trying to kill you with an AK. You should know how to run an AK. You should know how to run an AR, right? So, shoot the first guy that you can and take his stuff. That's how you deal with that situation. If you find yourself on a legit battlefield with a shotgun, that's not the tool for that. Guns are tools. I love the shotgun because it's so versatile, but it's not going to go toe-to-toe on a battlefield with an AK-47. There's a good case for it if you're doing strictly urban warfare, you're strictly door kicking, maybe you're crossing a street, but you're mostly indoors in urban environments, which a lot of modern warfare is. But if you find yourself on a battlefield, like legit, like you're lined up on this side, they're lined up on that side, and you got hundreds of people shooting at each other, even dozens of people shooting at each other, the shotgun's not for you. Not in that situation. That's not the right tool for that. That's like saying, how do I carry 22 long rifle ammo for grizzly bear defense? Like, well, the 22 long rifle is not the gun for grizzly bear defense. As far as everything else, I generally load from a side saddle. It's what I practiced a lot when I was L.A.P.D. What I've said is shy of a battlefield, right? And again, this is not the tool for that. But what problem are you going to have in the real world that you can't solve with 5 rounds of double-aught buck or number 4 buck, my preferred load, that you're going to solve with a bunch of more ammo? I like the side saddle because if I do run dry, I can quickly throw one more round in there and load it very quickly. I mean, very quickly when you practice. I also like it for changing out ammo. If I'm generally running, like let's say for my truck shotgun, I generally like double up buck for that. Well, if I need a slug for things that slugs do, then I just pull one out of the side saddle and I load it. So I generally like the side saddle. Anything more than that, however you prefer. I generally just carry mine in a satchel. Not everything has to be Molly and tactical. So even for a tactical shotgun. So there you go there. Hopefully that answered that question. They're all good questions. Magazine-fed shotguns. And he's talking about like a box magazine. All shotguns, unless it's a single shot or double, are magazine-fed. But I think he means box magazine versus traditional tube magazine. Yeah, they're mostly not a good idea. There's a reason the tube-fed mag has been around for so long. Again, if you're in a situation where you can't solve a problem with 5 rounds of double-up buck, or that's a standard like old-school bird hunting shotgun, pump or semi-auto. If you can't solve it with 7 rounds of double-up buck or number 4 buck or slugs, then yeah, that's probably not the right tool for the job. I don't think you're going to fix it with 10 rounds. Like, capacity is not the answer to every question. What are they good for? 3-gun. You shoot an open division. That's what they're great for. They're great for, and I love competition shooting, and I like 3-gun. If that's what you're doing and you're going to shoot an open division, that's what those are for. Also, a lot of people, especially military guys that have gone up, it was a time when pretty much any American man grew up hunting and shooting, and he knew his way around a firearm. That hasn't been the case in America probably since the 50s, maybe 60s. A lot of people, they join the military, which is great. Young men join the military, but that's the only thing they've ever shot is an AR-15 with a box-fed magazine. You give them a tube-fed gun, and they look at it like a frog looking at a wristwatch. They just don't know what to do with it. They don't know what it's for. And if that's you and you've only ever shot an AR-15, and you only know how to shove a box magazine into a firearm to reload it, and you don't want to spend the time to learn anything else, then yeah, there's a valid argument for that. But in general, just let's say no. That's really it. Yeah. So yeah, 3-gun, or you just don't want to learn how to load a tube magazine. 28 gauge. Why would anybody choose one? What's it good for? It's good for upland bird hunting. If you're doing upland bird hunting, depending on what you're doing, you can walk a lot. You're walking a lot, maybe shooting a little, and that means a lighter shotgun. Generally, if you're like in the bourgeoisie of upland game bird hunting, not like you're just going out, to get food, to get birds, but like it's like what you do. You got your super sweet tweed outfit, and it's like high class. It's like you're going out to like golf, but you're bird hunting, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's way stupider hobbies you can have than bird hunting. You could watch football, which is exponentially stupider. I just made a bunch of people mad, but whatever jersey wins that football game, you just watched a bunch of millionaires chase after a ball and you threw money at them. Have fun with that. But a lot of people, it's a really upscale, fancy hobby. You can get really expensive side by side and over and under, double guns. Well, if you're walking a lot, you want a light shotgun. And you can get a very small frame shotgun, 28 gauge. And going back to that pellet count, shooting birds out of the air, you can do it with a 410, but it's a lot harder. You get a lot more pellets per the same size of shot with a 28 gauge while still having a very small frame. And that's really what the 28 gauge is for, and that's really all it's for. So yeah, that's what, and it's great for that. Something like a good double gun. They're not all crazy expensive, but a lot of really nice 28 gauge doubles are pretty expensive. But that's really what they're for, upland game bird hunting. Not that you couldn't like reload buckshot in a 28 gauge and it would be more than enough, because 410 is enough. It's just not really a thing. So yeah, that's what they're for. That's where the 28 gauge shines. That's what keeps it hanging on. Let's see here. Are target loads good for hunting? This is from John. I might have forgotten to mention who some of the other ones were from. Are target loads good for hunting small game, specifically AA load? If yes, what game? Yes, they are. Very small birds. they're designed for shooting clay pigeons, but there are decent loads for dove and quail. Again, depending on how you hunt dove and quail, but they absolutely can be. If you shoot birds fairly close over dogs, like a small bird, like a mourning dove is a pretty small, delicate bird. They're fast and can be hard to hit, but once you hit them, they're pretty small and delicate. So yeah, for small birds. They are not for, I would say, not recommended for anything bigger. I would not recommend them for grouse. I would not recommend them for pheasant. I would not recommend them for squirrels or rabbits, especially. I would recommend them for very small birds, at close distance. Dove, quail, snipe, things like that. So yeah, they can be good for that, and that's about it. Let's see here. Well, that's the end of questions that I got at the time of this recording that I posted today. A lot of really good questions. Tells me there's a lot of questions out there about shotguns. I may do this as a part 1 and part 2, depending on how many more questions I get. If I get other questions from the patrons, maybe I'll just answer them via text. I also answered a lot of those questions via text for them already, which is going to bring us to, a lot of this was like tips and advice. So probably skip the tactical tip of the day. Let's do the tactical verse of the day. The soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.